Hey there. I did this pretty fall design. It's got a little hint of Halloween in it, but it doesn't have to. We're going to be using my non-dominant hand to do the design on my dominant hand. I'm using these relatively inexpensive French manicure nail pads that are meant to go into dual forms or poppets. And my free edge is not very deeply curved. So if you wanted to do this and have like a much deeper kind of curve and you don't, you could of course use a solid color over your nail and use a pad that has a much deeper curve. The advertisement calls these stickers, but they aren't truly stickers. They won't stick to just anything. So you can't just stick them to your nail. They will just fall right off. One of the things that I thought was kind of cool about these is that they could be reusable. So you can just wipe them off and use them again and again and again. I also like that there are different sizes, so you can customize the size of the curve for each nail. These little pads do stick to a jelly stamper, so I'm just going to stick it to one of my jelly stampers and then using a relatively inexpensive eyeshadow that is fairly pigmented. I'm going to pat just around the edge. My design is more of like a French tip that's ombre. If you don't want it to have an ombre effect, you can just continuously solidly pat it out until it matches about the length of your nail. I'm using black and white, which don't totally go with the design that I chose, but I wanted to test black and white just because I think that those are the two colors that most people would choose for a French manicure. Once I put the color down just on the edge, I'll clean the brush and then go back in and blend it out a little bit to get a little bit more of that ombre effect. The eyeshadows that I'm using are pretty old. I'm gonna guess that they're probably a good 20 years old. I really don't get rid of anything. They were just really nice eyeshadows. They're very metallic and they're in multiple different types of fall colors, like your golds, your coppers, your browns. You can directly stamp it right off of the stamper without doing this, but it will be very lightly pigmented and will be very easy to wipe off. So to prep this, what I like to use is OPI's Infinite Shine Primer Base Coat. The reason why is because there is something very special about this formula for stamping. It is sticky. And it's kind of weird because it also has kind of an odd stretch to it. So I just find it to be very good for stamping. So what you can do is you want to go ahead and polish like straight up the middle of the design like a highway. You don't really want to go all the way around the design too much because you'll just end up with a whole bunch of excess stuff stamped that you then have to clean up. And then you want to go ahead and put this same base coat down just on your fingernails and allow that to dry a little bit until both are just a little bit tacky. This whole process is pretty quick if you have a lot of jelly stampers. I would imagine this would take a little while if you didn't. If you mess up and you need to get the shadow off of the jelly stamper, using acetone is your best bet here. It doesn't really wipe off with alcohol and you can't really use like a lint roller. Like you kind of can, but you have to stamp it on the lint roller like 30 times before it actually comes off. So I just found the best way was just wiping it off with acetone. So most of the colors that I tested, they were metallic and really heavily pigmented. I think that one of the colors that I really wanted to test was something that was a lot paler. So this is kind of white. It still has a metallic sheen to it, but it's a whitish sort of color. But I did find that it worked really well. At any time, if the shadow is not super heavily pigmented or whatever, and you need to get it to be a little bit more dense, you can just stamp it twice. So the moment of truth, let's start with the black and stamp on the thumb. And you can see it stamps really cleanly. So the only thing is that you are always going to end up with a little tiny bit of overlay. And there are multiple different ways that you can take that overlay off. You can go around the edges with a nail art brush that's dipped in acetone to just kind of melt it off. Or you can kind of file around the nail to file it off. Because it's a primer and not like really lacquer, it's a whole lot easier to remove. I'm just going to quickly go around and stamp all of the rest of the nails. And then for me, I chose to just use a nail file and file off the excess around the edges. You can stop there if you want, if you just want a French manicure. And the nice thing about this particular technique with this is that because we used the base coat on the stamper, it's less likely to smear if you just use a standard lacquer top coat. I decided I wanted to zhuzh it up a little bit, so I decided to do a little stamping on my thumb and on my ring finger. I have a plethora of stamping plates. I absolutely love stamping, and so I picked a couple of cute little designs, one being this cute little spider web. So I'm just going to do the little spider web kind of on the edge of my thumb, and that is Hollow Taco's Not Milky White formula. I was super surprised that this worked because the etching on these plates, they were very cheap, is not very deep. There is a little spider on the same plate, so I decided to do a little black spider. That did not pick up very well, but I actually think my jelly stamper was to blame this time. I think that one of my jelly stampers is just like really, really old and doesn't quite have the same stick that it used to. And then on my ring finger, I'm going to do a little pumpkin. So there's a little outline of a pumpkin that's in the middle of a whole big crazy design that I wanted. I had to go for like the really hard one, right? I couldn't just find a pumpkin that was solo, singular little pumpkin. So I just used some tape to pull up the parts of the design that I don't want, just so that I have that little outline. And because it's a black outline, I needed to kind of fill in, put like a little dot of orange down on my ring finger and then put the stamper on top of that so the pumpkin was colored. Once everything is completely and totally dry, I'm going to go in with a gel top coat. This is just Gelish's gel top coat, and I'm going to cure it in the lamp. The reason why I do this usually over stamping is one, because it doesn't smear. It kind of smooths out the design, and because it lasts longer. So it kind of depends sometimes on how much I like the design or how long I want to keep it. And because I really liked this design, I wanted to keep it. So I don't even have a peely base coat on underneath this. So for the cute little ring design that is on my middle finger, I used Model 1 Solid Builder Gel. You can use it to do 3D nail sculpting. And so I'm just going to take a little teeny tiny ball. You do not need very much of this. And I'm going to roll it out into a little tiny, like thin snake. And you want this to be quite thin, actually. So even when you kind of think like, oh, that seems pretty thin, you probably want to go a little bit thinner. It does stretch out a little bit. So be careful for that when you pick it up. And I did find this kind of difficult because this was using my non-dominant hand. I did find it a little bit awkward to place and stuff. So then I just used this little tool to kind of push it into shape. It would have been considerably easier had this just been straight across, but I had kind of a double ring thing going on. So yeah, and plus I had kind of curved it because I wanted to put the little gemstone in. So I basically just place 2 parallel lines across my middle fingernail and then use this little tool just to kind of, nudge it into place in the way that I wanted it to be. But again, because it was my left hand doing it, it was shaky and it was a little bit difficult to do well. And then for the gemstone part of this, what I do is I take a little teeny tiny ball. It's a very, very small little ball. And I just, roll it into a little ball and pick it up and put it right in the middle. And then I'll flatten it out a tiny bit, pick up a gemstone and put the gemstone right smack in the middle of that. So it kind of looks like the gemstone is in a setting. And then I'll cure that in the lamp for however long the instructions say. I think I cured mine for like 90 seconds. And then I'll use some chrome powder just to go over the top of that. It just kind of takes a while to do again because it's really quite small, and using my left hand, it's just so hard. I realize that with practice, I'll get better at that, but it's just really hard. So, it's a design that you can accomplish with your non-dominant hand, so that's a bonus. But it does take a little while just with the chrome powder to like go around and, kind of color that design. It was just effort. Once that's all done, I just go in with the same gel top coat, cure it, wipe off the dispersion layer, and then it's done. The only thing about the gemstones, you aren't really supposed to go over the top of the gemstones with any kind of lacquer or polish in any kind of way because it kind of ruins the faceting. And I do roll over the top of it here. That's okay. It doesn't really bother me that much, but you're not really technically supposed to go over the top of the gemstone. Add a little bit of cuticle oil and then do some jazz hands.